Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to talk about advanced control flow, including advanced features with loops and conditionals. So without further ado, let's get started. In the past few videos, we have already talked about the basics of control flow in Python. In this video, we'll dive even deeper and talk about nested control flow as well as some other complex things that we can do to modify a program to suit our needs. The first thing that we will talk about is nested conditionals. So far, the conditionals that we have been writing have only had one branch, so as long as that one condition is satisfied, the statements in the block will run. Quite often though, in programming you'll encounter situations where you want your conditionals to be more complicated. Let's take a look at this example. We can see if weather is sunny and if park is open, we'll print out let's go to the park. If weather is sunny and park is not open, in the else block, we're going to print out the second statement. And if the weather isn't sunny at all, we'll print out the third statement before printing out have a nice day. If I run the program, we can see the second statement is run and have a nice day is printed out afterward. Below is another example of how we can use nested conditionals. However, it's such an extreme case of how we can use it that you'll probably never see something like this in real life. Firstly, we ask the user for a number between 0 and 10, inclusive, and we're going to try to evaluate what this number is in the conditionals. If I run this program and enter, say, 5, and you'll see num is 5 is printed out. What happened was the program is going to look at num. Is 5 less than 5? No. So it's going to go to the else block right here. Is num, which is 5 greater than 7? No. Is 5 greater than 6? Still no. Is num, which is 5 less than 6? That is true, so it'll print out num is 5. To be honest, you'll probably never see or write such a useless program as the one shown above, but it is still a good example of how we can use nested conditionals in our programs. Just like with conditionals, we can also nest loops inside one another. Here are two examples of nested for loops. In the first cell, we can see for each character in the string hi, we're going to have a for loop that iterates through the string by and print out the variable of the outer loop concatenated to the variable of the inner loop. Running the code, we can see this is what's going to be printed out. The first time that the outer loop runs, the car high variable is going to hold the value of h, and the inner loop is going to be run 3 times. The first time with car by being the value of b, the second time being y, and the third time e. And we can see hb, hy, and he printed out. The second time that the outer loop is going to run, car high is going to have the value of I, and car by is going to be b, and then y, and then e. And you can see this reflected in the second part of the printout, the output. In the second example, we can see for I being in the range of 1 and 3, for j being in the range of 20 and 22, and for k being in the range of -1, -3, with a decrement of 1, we'll print out the product of the 3 loop variables. And running the program, we can see this is what's going to be printed out. We can also nest for loops, and we can even combine multiple for loops with multiple while loops, but only if you see the need to, since nested loops can often be quite confusing when we are debugging in other situations. The second part of this video is going to be about control flow keywords in Python. The first one we'll look at is the continue keyword, and it's used to continue the program to the next iteration of a loop, both a for loop and a while loop. Here's an example of how the continue keyword is used in for loops. For I in range 10, if I mod 2 is equal to 1, which means if I is an odd number, the program is going to be continued to the next iteration of the for loop. Otherwise, I is going to be printed out. If I run the cell, you can see the even numbers between 0 and 8 printed out. And what happened was, firstly, I is 0, and since this is not true, this isn't run, so I is printed out. The second time the loop runs, I is going to be 1, and since I mod 2 is indeed 1, continue is going to be executed, and the program is going to be brought up here without running this line of code. And so the I value of 1 is never printed out. And here's an example of using the continue keyword in while loops. The variable num is first assigned the value of 10, and while num is greater than 7, this is going to happen. If I run the cell, we can see 9, 7 out of loop printed out. Firstly, we can see num is 10, and 10 is indeed greater than 7, so the loop is going to be run. 10 is going to be decremented by 1, so now num is going to be 9. And this isn't true, so this isn't run, and 9 is going to be printed out. The next time the loop runs, 9 is greater than 7, that is indeed true, so the loop is going to run, and 9 is going to be decremented by 1, so now num is going to be 8. And since 8 is indeed equal to 8, the program's control is going to be continued to the next iteration or next time that the loop runs. So 8 was never printed out since this was never happened for num equaling 8. The second keyword used in Python's control flow is the break keyword. It's used to break out of the loop that it's in and flow the program to its next part. Here, we use the break keyword inside a for loop. For I in range 0 all the way up to this huge number, by increments of 2, we're going to print out a statement using the variable I, and if I is equal to 4, however, the loop is going to be broken. If I run the cell, instead of printing out this many statements, only 3 lines are printed out inside the loop. The first time, I is going to be 0, and then it's going to be 2, and then it's going to be 4. And after printing out the statement, 4 is indeed equal to 4, so the loop is going to be broken by this break keyword, and the for loop has been exited as printed out afterward. And in this cell, we can see that the break keyword is used inside a while loop. Num is first assigned a value of 3, and while num is less than this huge number, if num is equal to 6, the loop is going to be exited. And if this doesn't happen, we're going to print out num and then increment num by 1. Running the cell, we can see 3, 4, and 5 printed out, and then the loop is exited. The last Python keyword we're going to cover today is the pass keyword. What it does is literally nothing, and so why will you use it? Perhaps when writing shorter programs you won't need it, but when you start writing longer and longer programs, you might find yourself wanting to put down an empty placeholder for some code that you want to write later on. Here's an example of using the pass keyword inside a for loop. For I in range of this huge number, pass is going to be executed. Running this cell, we can see entering for loop is run, and after a few moments, loop exited is going to be printed out. And the reason why it took some time for this to be printed out was this still took some time because although nothing was printed out or nothing was actually happening behind the scenes, the iterations still need to happen. And here's how we use the pass keyword inside conditionals. This conditionals section of the program is going to print out nothing because it's just full of pass statements. Running the cell, we can see indeed nothing was printed out between the entering and exiting of the conditionals. When it comes to control flow, pass is usually used inside for loops and conditionals. It's quite unlikely and bad practice to put a pass keyword inside a while loop because it will just result in an infinite loop that will never end. And the pass keyword can actually be used inside functions, classes, and more that we'll talk about later on in this course, so don't worry if you don't know about them yet. And this will be the last lesson on control flow in Python. This is one of the most important parts of programming, and the skills that you have acquired in these past lessons will be used all the time. To conclude the lesson, today we talked about nested control flow, nested conditionals, nested loops, and we also went over control flow keywords in Python, including continue, break, and pass. Congratulations! You're now officially equipped with one of the most important programming concepts in Python, which is control flow. The skills that you learned throughout the past chapter will empower you throughout your programming journey. With that said, thank you for watching and happy coding.